You're bad for morale, Mahoney. Oh, you look like the sweet little boy from next door. But you don't fool me, oh no. You're the devil. And you're rotten to the core. And you're ruining my chances of training some men who might make pretty good cops.
I agree, sir. I've been saying that all along.
You make me sick.
I make everybody sick.
There is a shadow behind every building of all the buildings it could have been. Every square of land on the grid of Chicago carries the memory of what used to be there and what might be there today under different circumstances. This is often literally baked into the appearance of the building. The Hancock Tower, for example, one of the tallest buildings in the United States, is made up of a grid of windows, much like Chicago's grid of streets, with diagonal braces cutting through it, much like the handful of diagonal roads that cut through the grid of Chicago. These diagonal roads were originally trails used by indigenous people to carry water from Lake Michigan. In this way, the Hancock Tower, as a symbol of Chicago's power or industry or progress, is also a visual reminder of those who were on this land before us. This is what we can call haunted architecture. But before we get into that, we're going to go through a little Chicago history with the help of the legendary Chicago organizer, Frank Chapman.
I'll be brief. I'll be real brief. My name is Frank Chapman. I'm a field organizer presently of the Chicago Alliance Against Race and Political Repression. I'm a founding member of the National Alliance Against Race and Political Repression. That organization was founded about 47 years ago, I think 46 years ago now. Other organizations that I've worked for, I worked for the union movement. I worked for Local 1199 in New York for, off and on a period of about maybe 10 years. I worked for the Musicians Union, also in New York, Local 802. I did work for the American Friends Service Committee for a period of time, which is a Quaker-based organization. So these are the different groups that I've been with and whatnot over my almost 50-year period of being involved in the movement. Chicago, it's interesting that we're commemorating the 100th anniversary of the 1919 so-called race riot. It was really a pogrom against black folks.
In the summer of 1919, a black teenager named Eugene Williams floated his raft too close to a whites-only beach at 29th Street and was stoned to death. After police neglected or refused to arrest the white man responsible, racial tensions erupted over the following week as white mobs torched homes and businesses in the Douglas neighborhood. At the heart of these tensions was a shortage of jobs and housing as soldiers returned from World War I and as the Great Migration nearly tripled Chicago's black population. To the west of Douglas, the Irish immigrant communities of Bridgeport and Canaryville acted as a geographic barrier between the black population and the well-paying jobs at the Union stockyards and the Central Manufacturing District.
This is the 100th anniversary of that ordeal, which the police played a very disturbing role in. The police were, in fact, leading some of the racist mobs that were attacking black people and burning up their homes and stuff and killing them. I go back to that point in time because there hasn't much changed in terms of the relationship between the African American community, the black community, and the police. The police still see us as a hostile community that they must control. That's how they function in our community. They're a paramilitary type functioning. They function in our community like a military occupation. So everybody is suspect. Everybody's a potential criminal. And if they have the slightest indication that you may be threatening them, they can shoot and kill you, you know. The racism pervades the institution in and out. And this has, you know, expressed itself over and over again in the last 100 years. Most recently, it has expressed itself with the torture cases and so-called Area 2 of the Chicago Police Department.
Area 2 of the Chicago Police Department is on the far south side in Pullman, a former company town which is also famous for a massive strike in the late 1800s that ended with the army being called in and Eugene V. Debs being sent to prison, where he would discover socialism. But that's for another time.
Two police officers were killed back in the 80s, and John Burge was given the green light by the then Mayor Jane Byrne to basically implement martial law in the black community, where they could stop anybody, they could go in anybody's homes without search warrants in search of the murderers of these two police officers, and they just treated black people very brutally. They also started a torturing program where they kidnapped and tortured our people into signing confessions, admitting to crimes that they did not commit. I start there with the torture cases because that spirit of policing, that tyrannical spirit, still goes on to this day.
Unfortunately, John Burge's work is still being done. This is Holman Square, a so-called black site where since at least 2004, over 7,000 people have been disappeared, detained indefinitely without being officially arrested so their records don't show up. 80% of these detainees are black, and about 1% of them are allowed to speak to a lawyer.
When people leave their home, they don't know if they're going to return or not. They have no reason to be cautious, no reason to respect the constitutional rights of black people, because they're not being punished for what they do. They're not being censored for what they do. They're not being held accountable for what they do. And so they've been doing it like they got a license to do it.
The Chicago Police Department is also famous for the 1968 Democratic National Convention, where they worked hand in hand with the National Guard to tear gas and bludgeon tens of thousands of protesters who were demanding an end to the Vietnam War.
Also, they murdered Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, two members of the Black Panther Party, because they were calling for community control of the police. Well, we see what happens when there is no community control of the police. The torture cases happen,
We don't think you fight fire with fire fists. We think you fight fire with water fists. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state's attorneys like this and reactionary state's attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions where all of us people are getting together and have an international proletarian revolution. Right on.
In response to that, we have been demanding that what we need in Chicago is community control of the police. That's not the only institution in our community that we need to control. But that's the one that is vitally important right now, vitally, because that is the most life-threatening institution in our community right now. We need to control it. CPAC is an all-elected civilian police accountability council. CPAC was created to address this need. And what we have done with CPAC, we have drawn up some legislation, a city ordinance, that will empower the people to hold the police accountable, not only for the crimes that they commit, but for all of their conduct. CPAC members will be elected by residents in each police district. CPAC will have a racially and ethnically equitable and proportional representation. It will hire and fire the superintendent of police of the city of Chicago. It will write the police rule book, including all use of force guidelines. It will be involved in the regulation and approval of all contracts with the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago. It is a very detailed addition to the municipal code of this city that will empower the people in our communities, black, brown, all communities in Chicago, to say who polices our communities and how our communities are policed.
CPAC's elected councils in each district would have true democratic oversight, independent from the mayor, the police board, and the other bodies of government which have generally operated as a rubber stamp committee for police misconduct.
They have set up police boards, independent police review authorities, COPA, a Civilian Office of Police Accountability. They've set up all of these bureaucratic agencies that are supposed to give oversight of the police. They don't give oversight. They overlook, not oversight, overlook police crimes. And they're intended, they're meant to do that. They only give an appearance of addressing the issue of accountability by setting up these different bureaucratic agencies. They end up being an exonerating agency for the police officers. They're always letting somebody go.
Ironically enough, the police union dislikes COPA because it doesn't have enough cops on it. There's a few other proposals in the mix, a couple cooked up by an alderman that use Seattle and Los Angeles as models, with zero input from the Chicago community, so we can toss those. The other one is GAPA, Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability. Now, this one has a community base, though not as strong as CPAC's, and it's basically a watered-down version where the district councils act more like suggestion boxes than true community control. You can see why GAPA is the one currently supported by our new mayor, whose previous job was president of the Rubber Stamp Committee. Somebody put it this way, it might have even been Mr. Chapman. GAPA is a seat at the table. CPAC is the table. You may be familiar with the trial of Jason Van Dyke, who was recently given 6 years for the brutal murder of Laquan McDonald in 2014. For the first time in decades, a police officer in Chicago was convicted for his crimes. This conviction and the recent surge in popularity for oversight of this brutal organization seem like a ray of hope that this violent social order may finally be on the way out. And it's one thing to look back on an atrocity of the past as a reminder or as a warning, but Area 2 and Homan Square still stand. They still function, and for the most part, they have not stopped functioning. They act as living monuments to the tyranny of the Chicago Police Department and as dreadful memorials to the community it has harassed, oppressed, and tortured for generations. And now, after a recent city council vote, a new incarnation of this tyrannical spirit will haunt the neighborhood of Garfield Park, just north of Homan Square. This is the Cop Academy. For the past 2 years, this has been a heated campaign in Chicago. In 2017, Mayor Rahm Emanuel announced the plan to spend $95 million on this new public safety training center. Some things to know about Rahm Emanuel are that he was chief of staff to Barack Obama. He covered up video footage of Laquan McDonald's killing for over a year to win re-election, and his administration closed over 50 schools in majority black neighborhoods, and half the city's mental health clinics. He also stepped out of a city council hearing on the Cop Academy just in time to not hear Chance the Rapper's testimony against it.
I've been asking for money for over a year now to fund these classrooms, and on the 4th of July weekend, they announced that they're, very, in like a cool, finessing way, that they have $95 million or that they're proposing to build a $95 million cop academy. What else can I say? What is y'all doing?
In his last breath as a public official, Rahm oversaw the successful vote to fund this facility. $95 million for this. And the new mayor wants to spend way more than $95 million on it. Unlike the giant prison a block away from the Sears Tower, Area 2 and Homan Square aren't exactly noticeable unless you're looking for them. They're not skyscrapers, they're not downtown. Area 2 is housed in a squat complex surrounded by parking lots at the neglected southern reaches of the city. Homan Square blends in with the dozens of gutted-out brick factories from Chicago's meatpacking days.
Homan Square doesn't have a front door. Homan Square is nothing but a gigantic converted warehouse with inconspicuous doors all over and no front place to even enter. There's no driveway, there's no parking lot, there's nothing.
And this cop academy is even less noticeable. A very small portion of its footprint is reserved for actual structures. The two main buildings will be classrooms, labs, offices, a shooting range. Then there's a skid pad to practice donuts. And the rest of this 30-acre campus is used to create a little town. There's an L train, a couple graystones, a bungalow, some stores. There's a little mini Chicago in here for police to run around and play and practice shooting unarmed teenagers.
We sat through that whole trial of the Laquan McDonald case. He did not have to shoot that child 16 times. He did not have to do it. But when he got out of the car and shot that child, his defense was that he was doing what he was trained to do. Well, that is very, very powerful. Also, it's a very serious indictment of the Chicago Police Department. He was doing what he was trained to do. And then there were a number of police that got on and testified in his defense that he was doing what he was trained to do. Now, the police in the city of Chicago presently get 40% of our city budget. They get about $1.4 billion annually. That's very, very high. What price are we paying to get better housing? What price are we paying to get jobs? What price are we paying to fix infrastructure?
The money is right here. The city of Chicago has invested in housing and infrastructure and jobs, just on a small scale in a simulation inhabited only by cops. But maybe Rahm and his buddies are onto something. Maybe this is a great idea. Maybe what Chicago needs right now is a little separate Chicago, a sort of police Chicago, where the cops are free to roam around and do donuts to their heart's content, and our communities can be out here, in real Chicago, just living their lives. And maybe we could put it just a few miles to the east. So let me know if your city is doing something stupid like this, or if your city has a plan to rein in the tyrannical spirit of the police department, or if you just think community control of the police is cool. I have to extend an enormous thank you to Mr. Chapman for his time and his wisdom. It was truly a privilege, and I hope you enjoyed hearing from him as much as I did. I'll include some links to CPAC, to Carper, and to Frank's new book, The Damned Don't Cry, Pages from the Life of a Black Prisoner and Organizer. So please, support him and support the work that Carper is doing. And as always, thank you to the people on Patreon. Your continued support helps me spend more and more time and resources on these videos. So if you like this and want more, you're welcome to hop on board. And I'll be releasing the full interview with Mr. Chapman where he goes into much more detail about this stuff. And he discusses the organizing work he does. He talks about why he became a communist. It's pretty cool, so check it out. And if you're one of those people who are like, but what about black on black crime? Then you should definitely check it out because he covers that too. Alright, thanks for watching.
CPAC is not a revolutionary solution. It's a democratic solution, you know. CPAC changes the power relationships between the police and the community in such a way where those revolutionary forces in our community, those progressive forces in our community, are given greater organizing space because police tyranny is designed to cut that off. The police are the enemy of social progress, so long as they are controlled and manipulated by the powers that be.